I do want to let y'all know, and I did let the superintendents know that for one thing, before I get to January, December 16th, we do have a meeting that we would like for all of you that can to be with us. It's an HRAC, a Human Resources Advisory Council meeting. And we want to do it in conjunction with an FAC meeting, in the sense of just being sure that you know how critical staffing changes, personnel changes are, and of course critical to the finance and the budget and everything else that's going on to your payroll. So we do want to invite y'all to that meeting. We will send out notices regarding that meeting, but it is December 16th. On January 22nd, I believe, is our first FAC meeting in 2021. Leo Lopez has already confirmed with TA. David Marks confirmed this week that he will be there too. We invited Amanda, and of course Josh is with us every month, thank God, or every FAC. So the key thing is, and why I started to say I let your soups know, because you know we all would love to see the hold harmless for the whole year for 2021. We all would, I don't doubt after this training this morning, we all would want changes with that too. Now by January, that's already, you know, unfortunately a couple of months away type of thing. But anything that has come to your attention, to your district's attention, that you really want TA to consider, even if it's been submitted, because I know questions and comments have been submitted and we just haven't gotten we haven't gotten everything that we wanted, and that's not to say we can get everything, but we can try again type of thing to see how much more. So they will be here. If you, I would appreciate, and they probably would too, to be ready. If you already know the questions that you want to ask them, or that you want them to capture in their presentations, let me know, and you can forward that to me and to Oscar and to Christina, because with all the emails right now, everybody's trying to keep up as best they can. But you know, I would love to give them a listing of items even before we break for the Christmas holiday, and that may work out better for them, you know, almost a whole month in advance of when they're going to present. At first, you know, there's still questions on first, what are we doing with the enrollment? What are we doing with fund balance? You know, which indicators are changing, the timing of those changes and so forth, budget to actual. So anything that David Marks could help us with, Leo Lopez could help us with, Amanda and Josh and their orgs also have influence. So, and again, we get to see Josh every month, but the others we do not. And I had asked if y'all wanted anybody else. I'm pretty sure I didn't miss any emails there. I didn't hear back from anyone, but if there's anybody else in January, and January is pretty critical, and that's what I'm going to move into now, the best practice section. And I almost want to rename that to something else, but you know, in terms of preparing for your 21-22 budget cycle. And for a lot of you, January will start that. January, February will start that cycle. But here's just some questions. I didn't put together a PowerPoint. I put together, and please unmute yourself if you would like to discuss any of this, or if you just want to take some notes on it, and we can cover it in a little bit more detail as we go along every month, one day at a time, 1 month at a time. So what adjustments, if any, will you make to your 2021 budget, right, as a result of, and we have to start with 2021. It's hard to try to prepare for 21-22 when you're still trying to work through 2021. And it is a difficult, I mean, school business has been challenging from the get-go, but in my career, I remember having at least some times that were more slow down times, 8 hour day type job, but it hasn't been that way for several years. And of course the pandemic just multiplied work on a lot of fronts. So what adjustments are you making to your 2021 budget as a result of your 1920 audit? Some of you, again, have already submitted your audits, your June 30th district, so TA already has them. So what functions, overspent, underspent, did you have to do budget amendments for to keep them from overspending type thing? So how did the audit look? What was your bottom line number, not just overall, but in the different fund types, right? The different fund types, self-funded insurance, and I know y'all are gonna say she harps on this all the time. How much money did your general fund have to help your INS fund, if any? I was speaking to a superintendent, and he was checking. Well, he was asking about some things, and he did ask his CFO while I was with them on the phone type of thing. Okay, do we have enough pennies? And the CFO said, yeah, we do. And I thought, okay, just go back and double check that. And hopefully they're double checking, because I didn't quite see that was necessarily accurate. I still saw M&O pennies covering INS type expenditures. So what is 1920 audit actually showing you in terms of just district type information? Did anything run in the red? Carmen just presented on CNP. So how did that look? How did your attrition rate, what was your attrition rate for 1920? And were some of those positions actually just closed? Number two, that ties into positions very, it just lines up, current enrollment versus ADA. So again, your 2021 funding, at least for this first semester that we're in, the first 6 weeks, the first 6 weeks and the second 6 weeks, that's going to be an average number. And we've all gone through that, right, with the hold harmless. And then the third 6 weeks will be another one, if you all submit to TA that you want that considered. And then you're going to go on to, what TA does. And again, a lot of unknowns, because what will the pandemic even force not only districts to do, but TA to do? Because even that 14-day window for a campus closure was just announced yesterday, as Josh shared. So current enrollment and ADA. If you are not getting daily numbers from your PEAMS folks, daily numbers that you share, here's another real critical thing to me, that you share, that the cabinet members are getting, that your superintendent, I mean, if I were back in y'all's shoes, I would be showing them the numbers every time you have a cabinet meeting. If that's weekly, if it's bi-weekly, whatever it is, here's the enrollment, here's what we budgeted at, and even enrollment, ADA, here's what budget numbers look like, and here's the actual numbers. You don't want to get months, and we already are 3 months into one type of fiscal year and 5 months into the other type of fiscal year. You don't want anybody, having any concerns about, I didn't know that, or this wasn't shared with me and we could not adjust. No, information and over communication is much better than under communication. And I know sometimes they some folks will look at our numbers and not be overly concerned or as much as we are, but we have to keep presenting the numbers. And if the numbers are good, that's great. That's even, you'll be more popular if you're presenting numbers that are going in a positive direction. So current enrollment and ADA, and keeping in mind, one of the items that I think some folks want to address is if remote ADA is higher than our ADA, then our attendance rate, I should say, if remote attendance percent is higher, we want that. And TA has that cap. Josh did mention to the SUPs yesterday, I think it was yesterday's meeting, that he hasn't seen a district yet that the remote numbers are better than face-to-face, but there could be exceptions, right? So that may be something that we want to bring up to TA. So current enrollment and ADA, staff models presented by TA. I'm not real sure how many of you, and Oscar, I just know the poll is crossing my mind, so we may want to do that at some point here. How many of you are actually listening to the commissioner's calls along with your superintendent, or how you get the information? But staffing models are something that TA is trying to help districts with. You know, are you going to have a remote pool of teachers, a face-to-face pool of teachers, and then the teachers that can do both? And for this, I really would like to see, and I don't, the chat's over here. I'm just trying to look on the screen over here. On this, I really, has anybody done these? And again, unmute yourself to discuss, but on the staffing models, does anybody out there just have remote teachers? Because I know some districts upstate do. I don't know if ours though do. Where some of your teachers are just going to teach this year, or maybe even just a semester remotely. And by remotely, I mean they're not dealing with any of the face-to-face kiddos. Okay, I'm not hearing, I don't see any discussion on that at all. So I'm assuming no one had, it sounds like we're all still in the traditional staffing models. You hire teachers and you expect them to be in the classroom. And so right now, based on responses or lack thereof, I should say, all of the teachers that you've hired are doing remote and face-to-face or whatever it is that we need, but it's not a more defined staffing model. They're doing both. So TAs is trying to help districts because the teachers are feeling definitely burned out with having to do remote. And so they may have 15 of their kiddos. Oh, I got a chat. Let's see if that's something. 15 of their kiddos, for instance, of a 22 classroom type setting, like an elementary, those children are at their homes and they're learning remotely. And then they also have 5 to 7 children. And in some cases in their classrooms, and in some cases with campuses and districts, and this includes even our Region 1 folks, they may have the children in the classroom with the teacher, or they may have the children just in another open area. And so the teacher is really teaching all children, the ones that are on site and the ones that are off site, in the same format. So let me come back up here. Yes, our teachers are doing both. Okay, great. Our teachers are doing both as well. Okay, so far we really don't have like more. I actually know of a former colleague, her daughter is a teacher in the Region 3 area, and she is just a remote teacher. She's not dealing with any face-to-face type situations. And it is becoming, well, it's not becoming, it's been quite a bit of work for the teachers to try to handle any type of setting, and then even keeping track of the children, how that's all being monitored. So that should be something too that we discuss December 16th. So another reason for y'all to be there, to be aware of what your HR departments may be dealing with. But staff models presented by TA, various staff models. The commissioner, again, going back, because some of you may not be in on those calls, he's had various districts from across the state present on what model they're using and how they're using it, hybrid and so forth. The fourth item on here, auxiliary departments, less revenues and more expenditures. So less revenues, yeah, I tend to wonder, and we haven't talked, you know, I really do need to set up an open discussion type meeting, and maybe that can happen. I know these months are going too fast. Maybe that can happen in February. Not real sure that we'll have enough time in January, but we could try to, depending on our 4 speakers. And I want to be sure that they tell us everything and anything and all that they want to in terms of the invited speakers. But you know, what did your route services report look like in terms of revenue? You weren't running routes for March 23rd through the end of the year for the most part. So how did your transportation revenues get adjusted? And we can, and I'd rather have some discussion versus I know I can go to any summary of finance and look up your 1819 and then compare that to your 1920 in terms of what gets finalized there. But what did that look like? Because you weren't submitting the same route, or were you submitting the same routes? And I'm just wrong. There was a discussion item just recently in the last week or two that pretty much, that actually, for those of you that watched the Senate hearing on education, when did that one take place? Last Friday, as a matter of fact. There was a brief little discussion about no, districts are actually in worse shape transportation wise, not better shape, despite the transportation revenue funding change in House Bill 3. So less revenues, especially transportation, definitely CNP. How did your revenue lines, any of the revenue lines for CNP look as compared to 1819? And that again, possibly cabinet level report, right? Especially now that you have your audits or they are being wrapped up by January. All of our audits, Lord willing, should be wrapped up. Expenditures, there is some thought up in the Austin area, legislative wise. Just even our own local folks could be thinking, well, they didn't have kids in the classroom. They didn't have as many meals served. And so there's not a full understanding, which is difficult to do regardless. We still had to power up the buildings, whether people were in them or not. And depending on your AC systems, you may have had to power up those buildings like people were in them because of other concerns, mold type concerns or anything like that. Older buildings also. So what expenditures, how were the revenues and expenditures adjusted? And while you're doing all of this, 1819, I mean, the majority of districts, unfortunately, you're even dealing with just the fact that you just don't have the number of enrollment as you used to anyway. So you're dealing with multiple things at once. You're dealing with decreasing enrollment and the expenditure is not necessarily running in that same direction, plus anything that the pandemic has thrown off. We have been hearing, I should have mentioned this during number 2, but we have been hearing about, some districts upstate, they're ready, they've gone off of remote. They are not doing remote. They can get 90, 95%, even 100% of their kiddos in the buildings. That's not true for our districts, definitely, but it's not even true for some of the, I think, San Antonio type area, different areas of the state. So how will that impact? And now TA has gone on a case by case type basis. It was at one point, here's the form, everybody fill out this form. And now it's definitely more of a case by case basis. And again, you can open up the doors to the classrooms, and you're expected to by this point, the 4 and 4 and 4 weeks and so forth, that whole calculation, you're expected to. But if the parents don't want to send them, then you still have to do the remote teaching. Now, one district upstate did take the stance of you will send them or you will have to do remote with another district. I mean, and that to me, I immediately thought of our districts and thought, we can't do that. The Region 1 districts cannot say we're not going to do remote, because that would be very problematic. I mean, the parents here still want to have the option and are not yet 100% comfortable with saying, okay, have the bus pick them up. I have seen a school bus in my subdivision this week, more so, have the bus pick them up, and then, we'll let y'all watch them the whole day type of thing. We're still not quite. Now this, I should be able to get some chats. I hope I get some chats on this one. What percent of your kids are, Oscar, where's the poll? I'm trying to remember the poll question. What percent of your, oh, that's the poll question. Actually, let's go ahead and do this, and then I'll go back to how many kids do you have in the classroom? So will you continue with FAC Zoom meetings if we go back to face-to-face meetings? We're trying to get a gauge of if we do face-to-face, how many of you will actually come to face-to-face versus just continuing. So if you want to continue with Zoom, then it would be a definite yes. Will you continue with FAC Zoom meetings if we go back to face-to-face meetings? Even us as adults, we're still not going all over the place, you know, in terms of being in different, even when I'm in the building, I'm still having to be super careful. And I'm just waiting just a few more seconds or so for the poll. All right, even with us discussing the number, we still have 60 folks on the meeting participants, and we are up now to 28, well, of the 55 of us, 30. So even here, there are at least 4 people right now that would rather do face-to-face. They're willing to come back to face-to-face, but the majority of you, 26, and the numbers are still adjusting, would just rather continue with the Zoom. I have loved the Zoom. I really have. I'll do, obviously do either one. And I do miss seeing y'all and having the small side chats that we could before during a break. And of course the lunch chats also. But with the pandemic still raging, because it's still not where you could consider it controlled. So and Oscar, we'll just cut it off. So we're 85% of you would like to continue with Zoom meetings, and other 15% would rather do face-to-face. Thank you for doing that, for participating in that. Here's my next question. And thanks, Oscar, for the help with that. So going back to your campuses right now, consider all of your campuses. Some of you have many campuses. Some of you have a handful of campuses or less. What's the percent of the kids that are, and please chat away, that are coming face-to-face? Do you have 10% of your children coming in on average? You know, if you're a 10,000 ADA or enrollment district, I should say, do you have 1,000 kids there a day? Do you have 25 kids per campus and you've got, 4 campuses? Anything that will give me numbers, and I'm happy to see at least I've got one chat here. 15% of our children are coming onto campus. Okay, thank you for that. 15% in that case. Anyone else? And what percent of your kids are showing up for face-to-face? All right, here we got a few more. 20%, thank you. And here's another 20% of our students are face-to-face. Okay. Anybody else? Who else wants to? Okay, so 15, 20, 20. I feel, I'm not going to get into a caller or bidding deal, but anybody higher than 20%? Anybody higher than 20% of those of you still on with us, 61 folks? That's pretty small. I mean, that's a pretty, and I'm sure, because it always happens, right? A lot of that 15% or 20% are children of the teachers, and that's understandable. I mean, if mom and dad. So here's another question. How many of you are still allowing your teachers, and you can just chat on the chat, say I am, but allowing your teachers to teach from home? How many of you are still allowing your teachers to do any of their instruction from home? Giving the teacher the option. Okay, I'm not seeing any chats on that one. So, okay, here we go. We've got one. We are allowing some teachers to teach from home. Okay, so I've got very funny crickets. And yeah, I should have had a sound effect for crickets. I didn't. Of course, Oscar would have been faster than me on that. Let's see. Yes, it is being allowed. So there are some of you, I'm not identifying anybody, but we're trying not to. Some of you are still allowing it. So that means that you do have one of the staffing models happening in the sense that you're allowing some teachers to just teach remotely. And if your campus happens to have kids in, then you could have a teacher that's just assigned to that. Then I have some teachers are at school. So, and then all staff back to work, and I'm assuming at the office. So, okay, thank y'all for that. So auxiliary departments, less revenues and expenditures. We already kind of covered 1 through 4, kind of went back and forth with it. 87th legislative start. And it has definitely started. If you got a chance, I had actually forgotten that committee meeting was going on. And then during the lunch hour, I remembered. So I thought, let me go listen to some of it. And of course, they had different superintendents. They had one of ours, Lyford, actually, Dr. Brown presented on some of the assessment information. But it was just a Senate Education Committee that was going on. So I'm sure Mo Casey is going to start sending us updates. We will probably have Mo Casey present more to the RAC. I mean, we always have them present to us, but more to the RAC, and trying to keep your superintendents informed as much as possible. So that covers, okay, you got to look at all of these or take all of these things into consideration and much more. You all have your checklist. You all have your budget planning calendar for 2021 purposes. And then when do you start your 21-22 budget cycle? And how many board workshops, presentations will you schedule? So I can tell you that, and feel free to chat if you'd like to on that one. I can tell you that in some of the districts I worked at, we definitely started the budget cycle in January, and sometimes even in February. And it was a June 30th district that I'm thinking of, and we would have a budget workshop every month, just one budget workshop every month, so that we would be sure that we were ready. And we probably started that. Well, we started it before, but we definitely found the need for that during the 11-12 biennium, that we knew there were going to be cuts. We just didn't know exactly the percentage or the exact dollar amount. I told you all about that. We were estimated to decrease $25 million roughly, first type estimates that even Mo Casey had shared. And we ended up closer to a $12 million cut between the 2 years of that biennium. We will start in January and host about 5 workshops. I've also walked in, thank you for that. I've also walked into districts that literally had 2 workshops. And it was really a workshop and then you're approving. And even if you're tiny, I definitely would not be comfortable with that. Any year, well, and I shouldn't say that, that sounds kind of critical. I would just want more workshops and more communication with the board. And the other thing you always have to kind of factor in, for those of you that have May elections, I'm trying to think, do I have a listing anywhere of the May elections? How many of you would, then you have to kind of play catch up with those if you do have new board members coming on. And some of you, based on election results that I just happen to see or hear of, do have, 3 new board members or 1 new board member, or whatever the case may be. We will also host 5 budget workshops with budget committee. And that's another thing the districts do differently, right? Some have budget committees. And so you have maybe 2 to 3 board members. The ones that I was describing that we did, it was with the full board, the majority of them. We did do a smaller 2 people for insurance committees, but for budget workshops, we invited the whole board, and if they were able to come, of course they did. So how many, let's see. So hopefully this year, especially with all the pandemic new things that are coming up or that you have to keep your board informed about, I'm hoping all of you are starting January, maybe no later than February. And then you'll be updating them on whatever legislation is happening, even though there should not hopefully be a lot that taps into education. All we're hoping for and praying for in this session is that nothing gets cut. It would be great to see new money every session, but with, as Josh mentioned, the different considerations, that's not really going to be too likely in terms of new dollars. We include our teachers, directors, and some paraprofessionals and auxiliary employees. That's good. Keeping all of the staff involved in the process and knowing, even when you're having to deal with bonds, I've heard, just because of the last election cycle this November, early November, but I've heard it in the past too. I didn't vote for it because, I get to the poll and here's the question and I don't know enough about it. The district didn't communicate enough to me, and again, I'm sure that's happened to all of us. So what type of communication is out there? And the budget cycle is a good time to try to discuss anything. You could decide your budget cycle looking at a budget calendar that TA still has out there, as far as I know, right? What's going to get accomplished in January, February, March, and give the board the overview of that, right? Because they don't have to be directly involved or daily involved with that. You could also do a budget workshops just based on functions. We're going to take all the 10s, we're going to take the 20s, we're going to take the campus type expenditures versus the auxiliary departments. We've done that, especially because some of the departments are huge. Your function 51, for most of you, if not all of you, that is your second highest function. And now it could be even, it's probably still a good second. I don't see anybody else beating that type of situation or those types of numbers. What are districts doing regarding COVID-19? And you kind of answered that when I was asking, okay, are teachers still remote? Has anybody on the chat, has anybody had to close a campus for more than 5 days? Well, the limit was 5 days. Has anybody had to close a campus for 5 days? And now, of course, the limit's now 14 days. No, okay. That's good. You're getting, if you do get reports, you're getting in there and cleaning it up pretty quickly, sanitizing. And then I have heard, what are districts doing regarding COVID-19? I definitely have heard about just the contact tracing has been one of the most challenging. I just noticed the time. Well, anyway, has been the most challenging, right? Who was in contact with that person, and how do we reach out to them? And then if any of them are positive, turn out that they ended up being positive too, then you have to go to the next level. So that has gotten pretty complicated. On the Shiner ISD 2020 bond, that was just a district that was using, and please click on it and go there. I'm not necessarily going to take more time with it. But that was a district that took some debt that they had and turned that into bonded debt so that then they could charge INS pennies and free up M&O pennies. And we don't do that a lot. I mean, that wasn't something that I commonly hear about. I thought, well, that may be something else if any of you are carrying debt within the M&O area or the general fund area as a consideration.